All right, so we're on section 2 of this handout now, and as I tried to go through in the first section, the idea behind feature theory is that sounds are stored in your long-term memory, in your lexicon, and they're manipulated in your mental grammar in terms of a limited set of features. And those features are discrete and categorical. So rather than the continuous space of linguistic articulation or aerodynamics or acoustics, we're using a discontinuous categorical space of possible feature combinations in order to form generalizations and do processing of sound patterns. So in this section, we're going to go briefly over what some of these features look like, and then I'm going to expand out on the manner of articulation features in a little bit more detail in a separate section because it's a little bit more complicated. But let's take a look at these. And all of these features, as well as a number of other ones, can be found on a supplemental document that's linked from the website. It's called Adam Albright's Guide to Features, and it will contain all the features that you'll need to talk about distinctions between English sounds as well as a number of non-English sounds. Let's start with the vowels here. And so as we saw in the phonetics section, we looked in detail at the phonetics of vowels. We saw that there's basically 3, or in some languages 4 dimensions of vowel contrast. And that was height, backness, and rounding. And then in English in particular, we also found this tense or lax feature. And so each of these is going to have a certain kind of encoding in terms of distinctive feature theory. So in particular, vowel height is going to be encoded according to 2 features, the plus or minus high feature and the plus or minus low feature. Right, so this is fairly straightforward. Basically, high vowels in this chart, E, I, and U, are going to be plus high. And then mid and low vowels, so all the other ones in this chart here are going to be, not U and these are also high, so these are plus high. So all the high vowels are plus high. The mid vowels and low vowels here, like A, U, A, all of these are minus high. Low is not quite the opposite, or not quite the complement of high. It's going to be just the low vowels. So in this chart, only a and are low. All of the mid and high vowels over these directions are minus low. And the thing that distinguishes mid vowels from low and high vowels is that they're, as in a or here, they're neither high nor low. Minus high, minus low, minus high, minus low. There are no plus high, plus low vowels because that would be presumably physically impossible. I'll say more about that in the next section. For backness, we're only going to use one feature in this class. It's going to be the plus or minus back feature. And of course, all of the back vowels will be plus back. All of the front vowels will be minus back. This leaves the status of central vowels unresolved. And one of the reasons why is because A, central vowels are not that common. B, contrastive central vowels are even more uncommon. And C, it's not totally clear how to deal with them. It creates some complexity that we're not going to necessarily concern ourselves with this semester. And so for now, we're basically just going to consider front and back vowels. We'll use this single binary feature, minus back for front vowels, plus back for back vowels. In cases where central vowels come up, we can sort of use an ad hoc solution to get through it. We don't need any general solution for central vowels for this particular semester. We can talk about that certainly later, but it's not going to be super important for anything we'll do this semester. Of course, for rounding, there's going to be a plus or minus round feature. So unrounded vowels like E are going to be minus round. The minimal counterpart, E, is going to be exactly the same features. So plus high, minus low, minus back. But this one will be plus round. This one will be minus round. So U, O, A, U, these are all round vowels. Everything else is minus round. And then for English, anyway, we also have these tense and lax contrasts. And there are suggestions here about a bunch of non-English vowels, whether they should be considered tense, or this feature is sometimes referred to as ATR, Advanced Tongue Root. These mean the same thing for the purposes of this class. And I'm only requiring these for English vowels. So in English, for instance, E is tense, but I is lax. or minus tense. A is tense, but is lax or minus tense, and so on and so forth. This chart and Adam Albright's guide more generally also includes some tense lax specifications for a bunch of non-English vowels, and there is some reasoning behind that, but it's not going to be important for this class. We're only using the tense lax features basically for English vowels, so you don't need to worry, for instance, about whether E is a tense vowel or not. That's basically the vowel features. We have height encoded with 2 features because there's often at least 3 vowel heights that we need to deal with. We have backness encoded with just 1 feature because we're not really going to deal with central vowels in any kind of a detailed way this semester, so we're just using a single feature here. Rounding, same thing. You're either rounded or unrounded. And for English, you can be plus or minus tense, where plus tense is tense and minus tense is lax. Right? Okay, consonant manner of articulation. I'm going to go into more detail about this in a separate section because this is the one that departs the most from the pre-existing categories that we looked at in our earlier unit on consonants. Basically, there's a number of different kinds of manner differences that can be relevant to consonants. Right? And the main ones that are going to be particularly important here, actually I won't even say that. All of these features are going to be important, but they divide up the consonantal world in a slightly counterintuitive way. And so I'm going to just tell you that these are the values I'm stipulating for these different manners of articulation, and I'll try to explain this and practice with it a little bit more in the last section of this handout. Place of articulation here. We're going to be looking first at major places of articulation, and the 3 features here for labial, coronal, and dorsal consonants are going to be, labial, coronal, and dorsal. And I've written these here in all capital letters. It doesn't matter if you do that or not, but it's trying to encode this idea that these features might be a little bit different than the other features we're looking at. We'll consider that later in the semester. Here's the basic idea. Labial consonants, anything that's bilabial or labiodental, things like f, v, b, p, these are going to be plus labial, and they'll be non-coronal and non-dorsal. For coronal consonants, which is all 3 of these columns, they're all going to be plus coronal. They're going to be minus labial and minus dorsal, and we're going to need some other features to tell the difference between them. I'll come back to that in a moment. For dorsal consonants, or velar consonants in particular, they're going to be plus dorsal and minus the other 2 major places. This would also include uvular consonants, which don't exist in English, but might exist in some other languages. Those would also be dorsal. Glottal consonants are going to have none of these major place features. They're going to be minus on everything. And I'll come back to that in a second as well. First, let me talk about these 2 features, anterior and distributed. And these are going to be features that deal with the minor place of articulation of different coronal consonants. As we've seen in English, we have lots of minor place distinctions, or at least several minor place distinctions amongst the coronal consonants, and we're going to need to encode that somehow. So we're going to use these features anterior and distributed. These, first of all, are going to be undefined for non-coronal consonants. So labial consonants don't have feature values for anterior or distributed. Velar consonants, glottal consonants don't have feature values for these 2 features. Now for the coronal consonants, we're going to need to distinguish between interdental, like th and the, alveolar, like t, s, and n, and then post-alveolar, or alveopalatal. These are consonants like sh and ch, and in this class I'm going to say that the English r sound is also post-alveolar. How are we going to do this? Well, we're going to split the coronal area, which extends from the teeth all the way back to the palate, split it first of all by whether you're in the front part of that coronal area or the back part of it. That's what the anterior feature does. So dental consonants are all the way at the front of the coronal area. Alveolar consonants are also near the front. These are going to be plus anterior. The post-alveolar consonants, on the other hand, are going to be further back behind the alveolar ridge, and so those will be minus anterior. In fact, sometimes I'll even refer to these as non-anterior coronal consonants. That's what that feature is for. But then we're going to need a second way to distinguish dental consonants and postalveolar consonants, which are made with both the tip and the blade of the tongue. So those areas right behind the tongue tip are also involved in making these sounds. And we're going to refer to that as distributed. So these are ones with sort of sloppy or slightly weird shaped closures that aren't total closures, that involve doing something in particular with the sides of your tongue right behind the tongue tip. Those are going to be distributed sounds. Alveolar sounds like t and d and n are not distributed. They really are just made with the very tip of the tongue. So that's what these minor place features are for. Now, the only other complication here involves glottal consonants. And in general, in phonology, it often makes sense to say that glottal consonants don't have any place features, right? So I've written these all as minus here, but it's possible that the glottal column here should just be all not applicable, all no values. And this isn't going to be super important this semester, but I did just want to mention it. The main way that we distinguish these consonants in languages like English is that the glottal fricative h is going to be have this phonetically based feature plus spread glottis, and this will often be abbreviated SG. Right? And so that's also how we're going to handle aspirated sounds, because remember, those aspirated English stops are basically stops with a h part upon their release. So those would be all of the features normally associated with, say, a labial stop, plus labial minus coronal minus dorsal, and then all of the features associated with a stop, but then also plus spread glottis. That's going to be an aspirated stop, or the glottal fricative h. The glottal stop, which is not phonologically active in English, but we did talk about this a little bit in phonetic terms, we're going to give that the feature plus constricted glottis, or CG. And this is not going to be super important in English, but it might be important in some other language. And in particular, ejective sounds, which don't exist in English but do exist in many other languages, and other glottalized sounds like that are going to be plus CG, plus constricted glottis. So again, not so relevant to English. The glottal consonants are kind of complicated, and these are the features that we're going to use for them when we need to use them. We're not going to be overly focused on glottal consonants this semester. So again, I suggest you take a look at this Adam Albright's Guide to Features document, which is on the links and resources part of the website. And you don't need to memorize every single plus and minus value of every sound in every language for every feature, but it would be worth familiarizing yourself with at least some of the big English features for vowels and consonants. We're going to be doing a lot of work in English this semester. We'll also be working in other languages, and I'll give you feature specifications as we need them. But it's going to be much quicker to work on problems here if you have at least some of the features basically down in memory, so that you're able to quickly come up with descriptions of natural classes of consonants. Okay.